Welcome back. This is Sandy with Sandy's Organized Chaos, and today we're going to be doing this abstract tropical look. Now, when you think tropical, you think bright and vibrant, but did you know that you can use darker colors to achieve that same kind of tropical feel? Well, that's what we're doing today. As always, I'll make sure to put everything that I use today into the description box below so that way you guys can shop those items if you would like to. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and let's wake up, prep these tumblers, and slay all day. Let's do this. Alright, so today I am working on a 20-ounce, just regular curved tumbler. I went ahead and I prepped and I primed it just this gold color. That was the only thing I had on hand. I wanted to do bronze, but I didn't have that, so like a brown or a gold would work fine if you don't happen to have bronze. I'm going to use the epoxy method to apply my glitter today, so I'm just going to use a very small amount and spread that all around my tumbler, making sure that it is nice and coated in this epoxy so that way my glitter has something to adhere to. Now, after I have that small amount of epoxy applied to my tumbler, I'm going to go ahead and apply my glitter. This is called Sun Gold. It's a beautiful bronze color, and you can purchase that at socglitters.com if you would like to. But this is a super simple application. We're just using one glitter today, so we're going to fully load up our tumbler with our glitter. And after I do that, I'm just going to take my opposite hand and kind of push a little bit of that glitter away right off the rim. I'm using metallic glitters today, so when I go to do the sanding, it's very helpful to kind of do this so that way it doesn't, when I go to do the sanding, it doesn't kind of destroy the glitter in the process. Now I'm just going to set that off to the side and let that epoxy cure, and then we're ready to move on to the next step. Now that our epoxy has cured, we're ready to get our flood coat over top of our raw glitter. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and sweep away any extra glitters that just didn't get adhered down to our epoxy. And then I'll take it outside and give it just a very thin coating of my semi-gloss clear. Once my clear sealer has dried, we're going to go ahead and apply 20 milliliters of epoxy over top of our raw glitter. After we place all 20 mLs of that epoxy over top of our raw glitter, we're going to go ahead and put it onto our turner, do up a couple rotations with our torch to pop any little micro bubbles, and then we are going to let that cure. Now, because we used a fine glitter and we used kind of a thicker coat of epoxy over top of that, it should be pretty smooth for you, but if you found that it's just too lumpy for you, go ahead and apply another coat of epoxy before you move on to this next step. Now for this next step, we are going to start applying our abstract look. I'm going to be using 1/2-inch painter's tape for this whole process here. It just makes it a little bit easier to use one size. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and tape off the bottom. I'm going to use that seam right around the bottom of my tumbler as my guide, but you could just use a tape's width worth of the tape as well at the bottom to kind of give you just a little bit of that room at the bottom for you. This is going to be our base, and I wanted to make sure that it was something angular, something structured, because that's just kind of the look that I was going for. So I'm going to take my tape, and the first thing I like to do when I do this process is take one long piece of tape and fully kind of roll that around in one straight piece. And then I just kind of branch off from there with all my other pieces that kind of come off of it. And any piece of the glitter that's exposed is what's going to be painted. So you just want to keep that in mind as you do this. But as you go, you just want to keep in mind that there's no right or wrong whenever it comes to making art. However you feel it should look is exactly how it should look. This is extremely abstract. You just place your tape down, and just keeping in mind that this is pretty much all about the vinyls. So your placement of your vinyls in the end is pretty much what it's all about. So each one of these squares are going to be painted, which I'll show you here in a second. And then those vinyls are just going to go right over top of it. So you just want enough of these little spaces that are painted so that way you can put your decals down. But here is what mine looks like after I applied my tape. As you can see, just extremely random. That's all you want to do. And before painting, I'm just going to make sure that all those edges are firmly pressed against my tumbler. Now I wanted my painted areas to have more of a crackled look to it. I really like that kind of distressed look along with the kind of more straight angular look that we have going on here. So I'm going to be using the Elmer's glue method to apply that look today. So as you see here, I have my Elmer's glue, I have my royal blue from Pop of Color, and I also have two different types of brushes. I have a fluffy brush for my glue, and then more of a chip brush because I'm going for that rustic look for my paint. So all I'm going to do is take my glue, I'm going to lay that down first. So I'm going to go ahead and squirt this glue into each one of these little triangles here, just to kind of help out. I don't want it all over the tape, I just needed it in the squares. Then I will take my brush and just kind of tap it around, making, having thicker areas of the glue, thinner areas of the glue, because it'll give us different kind of crackle looks to it. Now, after I got all my glue applied here, I'm going to show you guys, I moved right into applying my paint. Typically, people kind of hit it up with a heat gun right here at this point, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to dry it too fast because I still need to be able to pull my tape after we apply the paint. So now I'm going to move right into applying my paint with my chip brush, and I'm going to keep in mind that I just want to do one swipe. I don't want to mess with it too much because I might mess with the crackle look to it. So just trying to keep one swipe all the way down from top to bottom, completely around the entire tumbler. Then after I apply my paint, I'm going to go ahead and remove the tape right away. Now, as I pull the tape, I'm just trying to be very gentle, making sure that I don't accidentally drop the tape on parts I don't want it to be on and all that. I did kind of nick it just a little bit right there. Not a big deal though. I think it'll add to it once we start to get that crackle going. Did I mention it's really messy? I'm just saying, it's pretty messy too. Now, after you clean up any areas that you accidentally touched on the tumbler, you just want to wipe it away really quick before we do this part. You're just going to take a heating source and you just want to very gently heat up your paint. And you're going to watch it turn from this kind of lighter blue to a more darker navy color. Now, you don't want to hit it up too much with your heat gun because it will start to kind of bubble up and it will make waves and your crackle, and we don't want that. So just hit it up until it starts to form those cracks just like this, and then you're going to set it off to the side and let that completely dry before we move on to the next step. And of course, if this was just a little too fussy for you, just paint it blue. You know, it's not a big deal. And don't forget to wash your brushes and your hand if you made a mess like me. All right, well, now that that's nice and dry, we're gonna go ahead and give it a coating of our semi-gloss clear before we apply our epoxy. I have another about 20 milliliters of epoxy I'm gonna go ahead and apply over top of our paint here. I'm gonna go ahead and place it onto my turner, hit it up really good with my torch, let that cure, and we're ready to move on to the next step. Now, while that cures, I'm going to go ahead and get my decals cut out. I found these Monstera leaves right on Creative Fabrica. I'll make sure to put that in the description box for you guys where I got them. But we are going to utilize not only the outline, but the inside that is cut out as well. So I'll show you guys that here in a minute. So I did the bigger ones, about 3 by 3, and 3 smaller ones, and 2 by 2. And I also did up some pinstriping down here. And I cut that 11 by 0.08. There we go. Now I'm just going to use the same color vinyl for this. I'm using a bronze colored texture metallic vinyl for all these decals because I wanted it kind of monochromatic with just hints of that blue peeking through underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and get those cut out. And after my tumbler has cured and before we apply the decals, I'm going to go ahead and trim up my rim really good. I'm going to go ahead and give it a good sanding as well, exposing just a thin line of that silver around the top. I will also flip it over and kind of sand down any little lumps that might be around the bottom edge as well. Then I'll give it a little spritz of my rubbing alcohol and wipe off any little debris that might be on our tumbler so that way our decals have a nice surface, nice smooth surface to stick to. There we go. Now, as I weeded my vinyls here, I made sure that I took the insides of those leaves and just kind of stuck it off to the side so that way, again, we could utilize the inside and outside of those decals. But before we apply those decals, I wanted to kind of give our shapes just a little bit more of a shimmer. So I have some holographic brown nail tape that I want to apply to not all of the edges of my triangles, just to some, just to kind of give it just a little bit more hint of a sparkle, just a little bit more contrast. But the main thing I can say when working with nail tape is any areas of that tape that you touch with your fingers, you don't want to apply that to your tumbler because it won't stick down. So any areas that you're holding onto to make it nice and taut, to make your outlines, you want to make sure that you are able to cut that away. So that's the main thing I can say when it comes to doing this. But like I said earlier, I didn't do all the sides, just kind of some of the sides. This is how it's looking. And that's how I'm going to leave it. Some sides are still an exposed line. Some sides have that nail tape applied to it. Now, after you have your nail tape applied, we're going to take the insides of our outline leaves here, and we're going to apply those first. I just found it was easier to apply them first before the outlines, because then we can just kind of place the outlines wherever we want over top of everything. Anyways, we're going to take the insides and pretty much just place them right on top of each block of color. So I'm pretty much going to work with these smaller ones first, the 2 by 2s here, and place those down first over top. I'm just going to try to make sure it's as even as possible. I have 3 of them, so I'm going to try to stagger them equally as I can. There we go. And then after I get my 3 small ones applied, I'm going to take the bigger insides of our leaves and I'm going to go ahead and apply those. Now I'm also trying to keep in mind that I don't want to go below the line that we had made down at the bottom. I didn't want to have to cut anything, but if you wanted that look, you could obviously kind of overlap a little bit and cut away any area you don't want below the line that we had made for ourselves at the bottom. And also with these bigger ones, I'm pretty much using up 2 of the color blocks that we had painted on, as opposed to the smaller ones where I only needed 1 color block to lay it on top of. Now after our solid leaves are all applied, I'm going to go ahead and come through and start doing my outlines. Now my outlines are going to be a little bit more different. The outlines I want to go in between everything, so it doesn't matter if they're on a color block or not. These are more of like filler to go in between everything. And after I got going, I realized I just wanted to use the bigger leaves for this, so I'm not going to be using the 2x2 outlines. I'm going to be using the bigger 3x3 outlines to kind of finish filling in with all this outline look. Now, when I first started doing this project, I gotta say that I was a bit nervous for it, but it absolutely amazes me how you can just use 2 of the same colors, pretty much just bronze and navy, and just make this really just dramatic look. Now all that is left to do is go ahead and apply our pinstriping around the bottom. Again, I'm just going to utilize that line that is right around that seam that is right around the bottom to lay down my tape. I'm going to make sure all those decals are firmly pressed against my tumbler, just making sure I press and apply heat with my hands to them to make sure they're nice and flat for me. Then all you have to do is apply your final coats of epoxy and she is good to go. Whether you take this design and duplicate it as is, or you take it and let it inspire you to create something that is completely your own, I hope that you guys had a lot of fun watching this tutorial today. Again, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.